Good morning, and welcome to AI Daily for Thursday, July 16th, 2026. I'm your host. For over a year, one company has been the biggest question mark in artificial intelligence. A startup founded by OpenAI's former chief technology officer, staffed with roughly 200 of the most sought-after researchers alive, and famous mostly for what it refused to say. Yesterday, it finally answered. And the answer was not what most people expected. It built a model with nearly 1 trillion parameters, and then gave the weights away. We'll unpack that in full. Then, OpenAI loses the rights to its own name in Europe. OpenAI's first piece of hardware turns out to be a $230 keyboard. China switches off AI companions for hundreds of millions of users overnight. Memory stocks take another beating in New York, and a very big earnings report lands in a few hours. Let's get into it. Our headline: Thinking Machines Lab, the secretive startup founded by former OpenAI Chief Technology Officer Mira Murati, released its first in-house model on Wednesday, July 15th. It is called Inkling, and the striking part is not just the size. It is a mixture of experts transformer with 975 billion total parameters, and the company published the weights openly on Hugging Face, where anyone can download and modify them. Think about what that means competitively. The flagship models from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google are locked behind APIs. One of the most richly resourced labs on Earth, built by the person who helped ship ChatGPT, just took a model of that scale and handed it to the public. And then it did something almost unheard of in this industry. In its own launch materials, the company stated plainly that Inkling is, quote, not the strongest model available today, closed or open. No benchmark victory lap. No claim to have taken the crown. That humility is not an accident. It is the strategy, and we'll explain why in models and tech. So let's look under the hood, because the architecture tells the story. Inkling runs 975 billion total parameters, but activates only about 41 billion per token, using 256 routed experts plus 2 shared experts per layer, with 6 routed experts firing on any given token. It handles a context window of up to 1 million tokens, and it was pre-trained on 45 trillion tokens spanning text, images, audio, and video, so this is natively multimodal on the input side. On benchmarks, at its highest reasoning effort setting, the company reports 97.1% on AIME 2026 and 87.2% on GPQA Diamond for reasoning, 77.6% on SWE-Bench Verified for coding, 73.5% on MU Pro for vision, and 91.4% on VoiceBench for audio. Those are serious numbers, particularly for an open-weights release. One detail worth flagging for engineers: reasoning effort is a dial you control, and the weights ship in 2 flavors, the original checkpoint and an NVFP4 version tuned for NVIDIA's Blackwell systems. The company also says the model kept improving in a log-linear fashion across more than 30 million reinforcement learning rollouts. Now, why give this away? Because Thinking Machines is not selling the model. It is selling the customization. Alongside the big model, the company shipped Inkling Small, a lighter sibling with 276 billion total parameters and 12 billion active, trained on a similar recipe for lower cost and latency. And both are available for fine-tuning on Tinker, the company's model customization platform, which is where its revenue actually comes from: training and fine-tuning services and ecosystem hosting fees. The bet underneath all of this is a genuine philosophical split with the rest of the industry. Thinking Machines argues that organizations which adapt AI to their own data and workflows will beat those renting a one-size-fits-all model from a bigger lab. Under that thesis, open weights are not charity, they are customer acquisition. A model you can download, inspect, and reshape is the front door to the service you pay for. Per TechCrunch, the company runs on roughly 200 employees, and a reported $50 billion funding round was said to be in the works late last year before stalling in January. The company has declined to discuss its funding since, so treat any valuation figure with caution. In corporate news, OpenAI just lost a fight over its own name. On Wednesday, July 15th, the European Union's General Court in Luxembourg upheld a partial rejection of OpenAI's application to trademark the term OpenAI in Europe. The court's reasoning is blunt. The mark is purely descriptive. Open would be understood as meaning freely accessible and bolted onto AI. The whole thing simply describes openly accessible artificial intelligence products, which is not distinctive enough to own. The rejection is partial, covering categories including software and cloud computing services, and it came in a dispute with the EU Intellectual Property Office. OpenAI can appeal to the European Court of Justice, so this is not the last word. But savor the irony for a second. A company that converted from a non-profit into one of the most valuable closed-model businesses in history has been told by a European court that its name is too generic to protect, because open means open. And note the timing. On the very same day, a rival lab put 975 billion parameters on Hugging Face for anyone to download. On the product beat, OpenAI's first branded piece of hardware has arrived, and it is probably not what you imagined. It is a keyboard. More precisely, the Codex Micro, a compact programmable macro pad co-designed with the specialty keyboard maker Work Louder, released Wednesday, July 15th at $230. It carries 13 mechanical keys, a joystick, a rotary encoder, and configurable layers. The interesting bits are the AI native touches. Light-up agent keys that show agent status at a glance, customizable command keys mapped to frequent Codex actions, a joystick for launching common workflows, and a dial that adjusts how much reasoning, meaning how much time and compute, an agent spends on a task. You configure it from the ChatGPT desktop app. TechCrunch describes it as a limited-run collaboration, so read this as a statement piece rather than a mass-market product. But the design premise is revealing. It assumes you are no longer writing code so much as supervising a fleet of agents, and that you need physical controls to see what they are doing and how hard they are thinking. One piece of context on the timing. TechCrunch notes this lands while Apple is suing OpenAI, accusing its senior leadership of a deliberate strategy to extract confidential information used in developing its own hardware. OpenAI has denied the allegations. Policy, and this is the story with the largest number of humans attached to it. As of Wednesday, July 15th, China's interim measures for the administration of AI anthropomorphic interactive services are in force. These rules were promulgated back on April 10th by the Cyberspace Administration of China together with 4 partner agencies, and they target a very specific thing: services that simulate the personality, thinking patterns, and communication style of a real person to deliver continuous emotional interaction, companionship, emotional support, AI that acts like it cares about you. What the rules require: providers must complete algorithm filing and a security assessment, clearly disclose that the service is not human, build an anti-addiction systems that interrupt users after 2 consecutive hours with machine disclosure reminders, offer instant exit mechanisms, detect unhealthy emotional dependence in real time, provide self-harm crisis pathways, protect minors including a prohibition on virtual intimate relationship services for them, and not train on user data without consent. Importantly, the scope is narrow by design. Intelligent customer service, knowledge Q&A, work assistance, education and research tools are all exempt as long as they do not involve continuous emotional interaction. The effects were immediate. ByteDance Doubao and Alibaba's Qwen both pulled user-created agent features from their consumer apps. ByteDance is redirecting users to its Maoxiang app to rebuild agents there, and giving people until October 15th to back up their content. Alibaba's Qwen has not announced an alternative. Whatever your view, this is the first real regulatory framework anywhere aimed squarely at synthetic emotional relationships, and the rest of the world will be reading the results closely. To the markets, with real numbers from yfinance, and the standing reminder that this is context, not investment advice. The memory chip story that started in Seoul has now crossed the Pacific. At Wednesday's U.S. close on July 15th, Micron fell about 8% to roughly $904, and Western Digital dropped about 8.8% to around $514. Note what makes that painful. Just one day earlier, both had been climbing, Micron up nearly 5% on the Tuesday. According to 24/7 Wall ST, the trigger this time was not Korean HBM4 worries, but competition from China, specifically Changxin Memory Technologies, or CXMT. Here is the background that gives it teeth. Per a Financial Times report picked up on July 8th, Apple has begun qualifying CXMT's DRAM chips for devices sold in China. CXMT is now the world's fourth largest DRAM producer, behind Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron. Reported estimates of its global share vary across sources, so we will not put a single number on it. The logic the market is pricing is straightforward. Standard DRAM contract prices surged sharply in early 2026 as AI servers pulled capacity away from consumer devices, and a credible fourth supplier gives a buyer like Apple leverage against the incumbent three. Worth noting, Apple has not committed to using CXMT commercially, and CXMT sits on the Pentagon's 1260H blacklist. But here is the split that keeps showing up, and it is the most useful thing on the board today. While memory got hit, the AI brains and the hyperscalers went the other way on the same session. Per Finance, Alphabet rose about 3.2% to roughly $371. Microsoft gained about 2.8% to around $396, and Broadcom added roughly 1.3%. NVIDIA was essentially flat, up about 0.3% at around $212, while AMD slid about 3.5%. So the market is drawing a line. Worries about memory pricing and Chinese supply are not being applied to the companies designing AI logic or running AI clouds. Two structural notes to close the board. First, per Fortune reporting on PJM's State of the Market 2026 Q1 report, expected data center power demand is a primary reason for around $23 billion in electricity price increases hitting customers across 14 Mid-Atlantic and Midwest states through at least the end of 2028. The AI build-out is now showing up on household utility bills. Second, the Bank for International Settlements published a bulletin this week on financing the AI boom, examining the shift from funding data centers out of cash flow toward funding them with debt. When the plumbing of a boom moves from profits to borrowing, that is worth watching regardless of where you sit. Finally, what to watch, and the first item lands within hours of this briefing. TSMC reports second quarter results today, Thursday, July 16th, at 2 p.m. Taiwan time. This is the single most informative event of the week for the whole AI supply chain. Recall that TSMC's June revenue was up almost 68% year-over-year, and the company guided second quarter gross margin to between 65.5% and 67.5%. Watch the commentary on AI chip demand, on CoWAS advanced packaging capacity, and on pricing for 3nm and 2nm. TSMC closed at about $419 on Wednesday, roughly flat ahead of the print. Then tomorrow, Friday, July 17th, Shanghai opens the World Artificial Intelligence Conference, running through July 20th alongside a high-level meeting on global AI governance, with organizers promising record exhibition space and product launches. And in the rumor column, multiple outlets report Google is targeting July 17th for Gemini 3.5 Pro. We want to be precise here. Google has not confirmed that date, and as of early July, the public Gemini API pages did not list a generally available Gemini 3.5 Pro model, so treat it as unconfirmed until Google says otherwise. If it does land on the 17th, it lands the same day China opens its flagship AI showcase, which would be quite a coincidence. That's AI Daily for July 16th. Quick recap. Mira Murati's thinking machines broke its silence with Inkling, a 975 billion parameter mixture of experts model released with open weights on Hugging Face, and told us up front it is not the strongest model out there, because it is selling customization, not the model. A European court ruled OpenAI's own name is too descriptive to trademark. OpenAI's first hardware is a $230 Codex macro pad. China's anthropomorphic AI rules took effect, and Doubao and Qwen pulled consumer agent features the same day. Memory stocks fell again in New York on Chinese competition fears, while Alphabet and Microsoft rose. And TSMC reports in a few hours. Every figure today was checked against primary sources. Every stock move comes from yfinance. And where sources disagreed or a claim was unconfirmed, we said so. Nothing here is investment advice. If this briefing saved you time, subscribe so you catch tomorrow's same time every morning. See you then.